The scorching sun of New York mercilessly beat down on Fifth Avenue, where Mateo, a 28-year-old man with disheveled hair and tattered clothes, sat on the sidewalk. His once vibrant blue eyes were now dull from exhaustion and hunger. The prominent ribs beneath his torn shirt revealed weeks of scarce food. Mateo watched the frantic hustle of people, feeling invisible in the midst of the crowd. His stomach growled painfully, reminding him that he hadn't eaten in over 2 days. "Just one more day, Mateo. You can do it. Someone will notice you," he murmured to himself, trying to keep his hope alive. "Who am I kidding? No one looks twice at a beggar," he thought bitterly. The hours dragged on slowly, and Mateo fought the temptation to rummage through nearby trash cans for leftover food. He had promised himself he wouldn't sink to that level, but hunger was an unforgiving enemy. His eyes involuntarily followed each person passing by with bags of food or cups of coffee. The aroma of a hot dog being sold on the corner tortured his senses, making his mouth water and his stomach protest even louder. "Maybe I should try that shelter again. No, I can't." Mateo shuddered, leaving the thought unfinished. Why did things have to come to this? I wish I hadn't grown up like this. I wish I had a family, a home. As the afternoon wore on, his despair deepened. He watched other homeless people approach pedestrians asking for spare change, but he couldn't muster the courage to do the same. His pride, the last thing he had left, held him back. An older man sitting not far away looked at Mateo with a mixture of pity and understanding. "Kid, sometimes things seem hopeless, but we survive," the man said, his voice hoarse from age and life on the streets. "I know, but sometimes it feels like our life will never change. We only have the few coins given by kind-hearted people, but we need more: job opportunities, housing, healthy food on the table," Mateo replied, his voice trembling between hope and disbelief. Suddenly, as if the universe had heard his silent plea, a middle-aged woman stopped in front of Mateo without a word. She handed him a paper bag containing a still-warm sandwich. The aroma of fresh bread and roasted meat filled his nostrils, making his stomach turn with anticipation. Mateo looked up at the woman, his eyes brimming with gratitude. "Thank you, ma'am. You have no idea how much this means to me," he said, his voice choked with emotion. The woman simply smiled gently and continued on her way, leaving Mateo in awe of her act of kindness. Maybe there is still kindness in this world. Maybe I'm not completely alone, Mateo thought, feeling a spark of hope ignite in his chest. As Mateo prepared to savor the precious sandwich, his gaze caught 2 other men sitting nearby. Their thin faces and hungry eyes were a mirror of his own situation. Without hesitation, Mateo divided the sandwich into 3 parts, offering them to his fellow sufferers. "Hey guys, let's share. No one should go hungry when we can help each other," he said, his voice hoarse but kind. Across the street, 2 women were watching the scene. Laura, a young woman with long brown hair and compassionate green eyes, felt her heart ache at the sight of such kindness. She took a step toward the sidewalk, determined to offer more help when she felt a sharp tug on her arm. Matilda, her stepmother, a middle-aged woman with harsh features and a cold stare, was holding her tightly. "Don't even think about it, Laura. I won't allow you to mingle with those people," Matilda hissed, her gray eyes sparking with anger. "But Matilda, they need help. How can we just ignore them?" Laura protested, her voice trembling with emotion and indignation. Matilda dragged Laura away from the scene, her high heels echoing on the sidewalk as they approached a luxury store. The contrast between the gleaming shop windows and the harsh reality of the street was striking. Laura resisted, her eyes still fixed on Mateo and his companions. Matilda abruptly stopped, spinning on her heels to face her stepdaughter. Her face twisted into a mask of disgust and barely contained anger. "Have you lost your mind, Laura? These people are dangerous. They would probably use any money you gave them for drugs or alcohol," Matilda hissed, her tone cutting. "You don't know that, Matilda. That man just shared the only meal he probably had today. How can you be so insensitive?" Laura retorted, her voice trembling with indignation. The argument between the two women attracted curious glances from passers-by. Laura, usually reserved, felt an uncommon courage growing within her. She pulled away from Matilda's grip and took a determined step toward the street. "They are human beings, Matilda! They deserve compassion, not judgment," Laura declared, her voice gaining strength. Matilda grabbed Lara's arm again, her perfectly manicured nails digging into her stepdaughter's skin. "You don't understand how the world works, dear. These people chose this lifestyle. It's not our responsibility to save them," Matilda argued, her tone condescending. "Chosen? No one chooses to go hungry or live on the streets. How can you be so blind?" Lara countered, tears of frustration glistening in her eyes. Determined, she managed to break free once more. Before Matilda could stop her, she quickly crossed the street, approaching Matteo and his companions. With trembling hands, Lara pulled out some bills from her purse. "Please take this. I hope it can help in some way," she said softly, offering them the money, her heart aching at the disparity between her world and theirs. Lara extended the money to Matteo, and the young man looked at her, surprised and deeply moved by the gesture. Their eyes met for a brief moment, a silent connection passing between them. "Thank you, Mississippi. Your kindness means more than you can imagine," Matteo said, his voice hoarse with emotion. "It's nothing, really. I just wish I could do more," Lara murmured, feeling both relieved and powerless in the face of the situation. Matilda, watching from a distance, felt a mix of fury and something else, calculation. Her gray eyes narrowed, focusing on Matteo. There was something about him, something that went beyond his worn appearance. A plan began to form in her mind, one that could solve multiple problems at once. Lara returned to the sidewalk, bracing herself for the inevitable confrontation with her stepmother. But to her surprise, Matilda didn't yell or reprimand her immediately. Instead, a cold smile formed on her lips. "Well, since you insist on mingling with these people, perhaps I should teach you a lesson about them. Don't you think?" Matilda suggested, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "What are you planning, Matilda?" Lara asked, suddenly apprehensive about her stepmother's change in attitude. As the two women walked away, Matilda cast one last look at Matteo. Her eyes gleamed with cold determination, an idea clearly taking shape in her calculating mind. Lara, still confused by Matilda's sudden change, didn't notice the look. She was lost in her own thoughts, replaying the brief encounter with Matteo. There was something about him, a dignity and kindness that stood in stark contrast to his precarious situation. "That young man, there's something different about him, don't you think?" Matilda commented casually, her voice carrying an interest that sent a chill down Lara's spine. "Why the sudden interest, Matilda? Just a few minutes ago, you wanted me to ignore him completely," Lara responded, unable to hide the suspicion in her voice. When they arrived at the mansion, Matilda stormed through the door, her heels echoing in the marble entry hall. Lara followed in silence, still unsettled by the events of the afternoon. Thomas, alerted by the turbulent arrival, emerged from his office, his brow furrowed with concern. Matilda wasted no time on pleasantries. "Thomas, your daughter is out of control today. She almost mingled with beggars on the street." Her voice echoed off the walls, laden with indignation. Thomas looked from Matilda to Lara, his face a mix of confusion and disappointment. "Lara, is this true?" he asked, his voice weary. "Father, I was just trying to help someone in need. I don't see how that could be wrong," Lara replied, her voice trembling slightly but firm in her conviction. Matilda grabbed Thomas's arm, dragging him into the office and closing the door behind them, leaving Lara outside. The muffled sound of their argument seeped through the solid wood. "Don't you see the danger here, Thomas? She's ruining our reputation by associating with the scum of society." Matilda gestured furiously, her eyes flashing. Thomas sank into his leather chair, running a hand over his face in exhaustion. "Matilda, she has a good heart. We can't condemn her for that," he argued weakly. "A good heart? In this world, a good heart is a weakness we can't afford," Matilda retorted sharply. The argument escalated as Matilda listed all of Lara's transgressions over the past few months: donations to charities without approval, volunteer work in poor neighborhoods, and her refusal to attend proper social events. Thomas listened, his face growing paler by the minute. "She's ruining everything we've worked for, Thomas. Our social standing, our connections, everything is at risk because of this obsession she has with helping the less fortunate." Matilda continued, her voice now a furious whisper. "But she's my daughter, Matilda. I can't just change who she is," Thomas protested, though his voice already showed signs of resignation. Matilda stopped pacing, her eyes narrowing dangerously as she faced Thomas. "I have a plan," she said, her voice suddenly calm and controlled. Thomas straightened in his chair, suddenly alert. He knew that tone, and it usually didn't bode well. "What kind of plan?" he asked cautiously, fearing the answer. "A plan that will teach Lara a lesson," Matilda responded, a cold smile forming on her lips. Silence fell over the office, heavy and oppressive. Thomas looked at Matilda, a mix of fear and curiosity in his eyes. He knew he should protest and defend his daughter, but years of Matilda's manipulation had worn down his will. "What exactly do you have in mind?" he finally asked, his voice barely more than a whisper. Matilda leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with an almost manic light. "That beggar Lara was so eager to help. What if we used him to show Lara that people like him aren't so good? What if she had to see up close just how bad people like him can be?" Her voice dripped with malice. "Matilda, what are you suggesting?" Thomas asked, a shiver of apprehension running down his spine. Matilda abruptly stood, her silhouette casting a threatening shadow over Thomas. She walked to the office window, gazing out at the meticulously maintained garden. A cold smile formed on her lips. "Marriage," she said simply. "We'll force Lara to marry that beggar." Thomas choked on his whiskey, his eyes wide with disbelief. "You've gone mad, Matilda. That's monstrous," he exclaimed, rising from his chair. "Monstrous? No, my dear. It's a necessary lesson. Think about it. What better way to show Lara the harsh reality of the world than by making her live with someone like him?" Matilda replied, her tone calculated and cold. Thomas began pacing back and forth across the office, running his hands through his graying hair in despair. "You can't be serious. You want to ruin her life just to teach her a lesson?" he muttered under his breath. Matilda's smile never faltered. She was sure of her plan. But what about her happiness? My daughter deserves more than this, Matilda," Thomas argued, his voice firm despite his evident concern. Matilda turned to face him, her eyes gleaming with unyielding determination. "Happiness, Thomas? We're talking about your daughter's future. Imagine the looks, the whispers at social events. Lara needs to understand the consequences of her thoughtless actions," she explained, each word laden with conviction. "This doesn't seem right, Matilda. My daughter would never be ashamed of a simple man. Besides, she has a good heart, she would hardly be bothered by something like this, don't you think?" Thomas questioned, a flicker of pride in his voice as he thought of his daughter's strong character. Matilda laughed, a cold, humorless sound that echoed off the office walls. "Oh, Thomas, do you really believe she could handle it? She may have a kind heart, but she's still a girl raised in luxury. A few days living with that beggar, and she'll be begging to come to her senses," she said dismissively, waving away Thomas's concern. Thomas leaned against the desk, the weight of Matilda's proposal clear in his slumped shoulders. "And the young man, how are we going to convince him to go along with this?" he asked, his voice filled with skepticism. "Money, dear. We'll offer him an amount he can't refuse. For someone in his situation, it will be an irresistible offer," Matilda replied confidently, her voice brimming with certainty. Silence filled the office, heavy and oppressive. Thomas stared into the void, his mind a storm of conflicting emotions. Paternal love and concern for Lara's well-being clashed with the fear of potential social consequences. I don't know, Matilda. This seems to go too far. Can't we just talk to her?" he finally murmured, his voice laden with doubt. Matilda stepped closer to him, her tone softening but still firm. Thomas, dear, words aren't enough. Laura needs to see for herself. Sometimes we have to be tough to protect those we love, she argued, her voice a mix of persuasion and false compassion. Yes, but forcing a marriage, playing with my daughter's life like this? There must be another way, Thomas protested, his gaze revealing the internal conflict he was facing. Thomas slowly stood up, walking over to the window. He looked out at the world beyond, a world that seemed so complex and full of traps for his beloved daughter. With a deep sigh, he turned to Matilda. This won't end well, Matilda. You're underestimating Laura and the strength of her convictions, he murmured, his voice filled with genuine concern. Irritated by Thomas's lack of enthusiasm, Matilda crossed her arms, her eyes flashing with frustration. Your hesitation is exactly why Laura is out of control. Sometimes we have to make tough decisions. You're her father. You have to teach her to protect her reputation, she argued, her voice sharp. The sun was beginning to set over the city park, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Mateo was sitting on a worn-out bench, watching people pass by, when an elegant figure approached. Matilda, in her designer coat and high heels, looked out of place in that setting. She stopped in front of Mateo, her cold gaze assessing him from head to toe. You're the beggar who was here earlier, aren't you? I'm Matilda, Lara's stepmother, the woman who helped you and was here with me, she said, her voice a mixture of disdain and false cordiality. Mateo stood up, confused and a bit defensive. Yes, that's me. My name is Mateo. What do you want, ma'am? He replied, his voice hoarse from lack of use. I have a proposal for you, one that could completely change your life, Matilda declared, a calculating smile forming on her lips. Without wasting time, Matilda got to the point. She laid out her plan to Mateo, explaining the arranged marriage with Laura and promising him a life of comfort and luxury in exchange for his cooperation. Mateo listened, his eyes widening with every word. You're asking me to marry your stepdaughter, the kind woman who helped me today, for money? He asked incredulously. Matilda nodded, her smile unwavering. Think about it, Mateo. You would never have to worry about food or shelter again. You'd have everything you've ever dreamed of, she insisted, her voice as seductive as a serpent. I can't accept this. I can't use someone like that, especially someone who was kind to me, Mateo responded, shaking his head in refusal. Matilda's irritation was evident, but she maintained her composure. Changing tactics, she decided to appeal to another side of Mateo. Think about the possibilities, Mateo. With this money you could help so many people, your friends on the streets, those who go hungry every day, she suggested, her voice low and persuasive. Mateo hesitated, his hands clenching into fists as he considered Matilda's words. The image of his street companions, hungry and desperate, flashed in his mind. I could really make a difference, he murmured, more to himself than to Matilda. Imagine how many lives you could change. Isn't that what Laura would do? Use her resources to help others? Matilda pressed, sensing Mateo's hesitation. As Mateo pondered, his eyes wandered to Matilda's coat, stopping at a gold brooch pinned to the lapel. It was an intricate design, a rose intertwined with vines. Something about that brooch stirred a distant memory in Mateo, a hazy recollection of a time long forgotten. He reached out involuntarily, almost touching the brooch. This brooch. I've seen it before, he murmured, his voice trembling with sudden emotion. Matilda stepped back slightly, surprised by Mateo's reaction. It's just an old family jewel. Nothing important, she said quickly, her hand protectively covering the brooch. How strange. I'm sure I remember this brooch. I remember someone wearing it, a woman, singing to me, Mateo whispered, his voice full of sudden recognition. Mateo sat in silence, struggling to piece together fragments of distant memories from his childhood. The strange familiarity of Matilda's brooch haunted him, and he couldn't shake the surreal nature of the proposal she had made. I hope I'm doing the right thing. But if this can help others, maybe it's worth it. He muttered to himself, his fingers nervously drumming on his knee as they drove away. Minutes later, Matilda's luxurious car glided through the gates of the grand mansion. Matteo, seated in the back, stared in awe at the imposing structure. Inside the house, Lara sat by her bedroom window, reading. She heard the car and, curious, glanced outside. Her eyes widened in shock as she saw Matteo stepping out of the vehicle, his worn clothes making him look out of place and nervous. What's going on? Why did Matilda bring him here? She murmured to herself, confused and uneasy, her heart racing with foreboding. Matilda led Matteo into the house, casting a meaningful glance at Lara. Wait here, she instructed him, leaving him in the entrance hall. With determination, Matilda ascended the stairs, knocking on Lara's bedroom door before entering without waiting for a response. Lara, dear, we need to talk, she announced, her tone sweet but laced with false sincerity. Lara turned to face her stepmother, her expression a mix of confusion and fear. Matilda, what's going on? Why is that man here? She asked, her voice trembling. Everything will become clear soon, my dear. But first, sit down. We have a lot to discuss, Matilda replied, gesturing for Lara to sit on the edge of the bed. Reluctantly, Lara obeyed, her eyes never leaving her stepmother's face. Matilda began pacing around the room, her heels clicking sharply on the wooden floor. Lara, your obsession with helping the less fortunate has become a concern for your father and me, she began, her voice laden with feigned concern. We've decided it's time for you to learn a valuable lesson about the real world. Lara felt a knot tighten in her stomach. What are you talking about, Matilda? She asked, dreading the answer. I'm talking about consequences, dear. And a marriage, Matilda replied, a cold smile forming on her lips. The shock hit Lara like a punch to the stomach. She stood up abruptly, her hands trembling. Marriage? What marriage? She demanded, her voice rising in disbelief. Matilda stopped pacing and turned to face her directly. You're going to marry the beggar downstairs, Matteo, the one you were so eager to help today, she declared, savoring each word. Lara's blood drained from her face. This is insane. You can't be serious, she shouted, her voice echoing through the room. Oh, but I am, dear. Very serious, Matilda replied, her tone dropping to a dangerous whisper. And before you think about refusing, let me explain the consequences of your non-cooperation. Lara staggered back, sitting heavily on the bed, her mind spinning in disbelief. I only helped a man in need. What did I do so wrong? You can't force me to do this. It's illegal. It's immoral, she argued, tears of frustration beginning to form in her eyes. Matilda stepped closer, leaning down until she was face to face with Lara. I can and I will, dear. Unless you want to see your new beggar friend face very serious charges. It would be a shame if the police were to find something illegal in his possession, don't you think? She threatened, her voice dripping with malice. Lara's heart clenched. You wouldn't do that. He's innocent. He has nothing to do with this, she stammered, fear gripping her as the gravity of the situation sank in. Why are you doing this, Matilda? What do you gain from all this? Lara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Matilda smiled coldly, straightening up. What I gain, dear Lara, is a daughter-in-law who finally understands her place in this family, and in society. You're going to learn that your actions have consequences, and not everyone you tried to help is worthy of your compassion. Lara felt cornered, her gaze drifting to the window where she had seen Matteo arriving earlier. The thought of him suffering because of her was unbearable. And if I accept, what happens to Matteo? She asked quietly, her voice filled with dread. Matilda's smile turned almost maternal, but there was a chilling coldness beneath it. He will have a comfortable life, far from the streets. And you, my dear, will learn a valuable lesson about the real world. Meanwhile, Matteo was led to a luxurious bathroom attached to his new room. His eyes widened at the sight of the large marble bathtub and neatly arranged toiletries on the counter. Everything you need is here, said the butler, indicating the soft towels and shaving products. Matteo nodded, still stunned by the situation. Once alone, he turned on the faucet, watching the hot water fill the tub. "How long has it been since my last real bath?" he murmured to himself, slowly removing his tattered clothes. "Will all this dirt come off? Do I even remember how to take a proper bath?" he wondered, a mix of anxiety and anticipation washing over him as he stepped into the hot water. Matteo couldn't hold back a sigh of relief. Years of grime began to dissolve as he scrubbed vigorously with a soft sponge and scented soap. He submerged his head under the water, washing his hair repeatedly. The water quickly darkened, a silent testament to the years he had spent on the streets. Matteo remained in the bathtub until the water grew cold, savoring every moment of cleanliness and comfort. "It's like being reborn," he whispered, seeing his skin free of dirt for the first time in years. Who would have thought something as simple as a bath could make someone feel so human again? He reflected, a wave of emotion washing over him. Wrapped in a soft towel, Matteo stood before the fogged mirror, staring at his reflection. His long, unkempt beard had hidden much of his face. With trembling hands, he picked up the razor and shaving cream, carefully starting to remove the beard. Each stroke of the blade felt like it was peeling away not just the hair, but layers of his life on the streets. When he finished, the man in the mirror was barely recognizable. "My God, is that really me?" he murmured, his fingers brushing over his smooth cheeks. It was like looking at a stranger from a past he had almost forgotten. Shock and fascination overwhelmed him. Dressed in new clothes, Matteo felt like an imposter. The soft, well-tailored fabric felt alien against his skin, so different from the rags he had been used to. He adjusted the collar of his shirt, uncomfortable with the sensation of being dressed up. He took one last look at his reflection in the mirror, a deep breath escaping his lungs. "You can do this," he muttered to himself. "With a life like this, you'll be able to help many people." He tried to convince himself as he descended the stairs. As Matteo reached the bottom, he felt all eyes on him. Lara stood there, visibly gasping when she saw him, her eyes wide with surprise. They locked eyes for a moment, and time seemed to stop. "Matteo," Lara whispered, her voice filled with shock and something else he couldn't quite identify. Matilda appeared, casting a disdainful glance at Matteo. "Ah, excellent. I see you cleaned up well, at least," she remarked, her tone falsely cheerful. Matteo nodded, struggling to find the right words as they moved toward the dining room. But he couldn't help noticing Lara's lingering gaze. What is she thinking? Matteo wondered, feeling exposed in a way that even life on the streets had never made him feel. Why is she looking at me like that? Days passed in a blur of frantic preparations and growing tension. Now, sitting in the chair of a luxurious beauty salon, Lara stared at her reflection in the mirror, her expression a mix of sadness and quiet determination. As the stylist worked on her elaborate bridal hairstyle, her hands rested gently on the white dress in her lap. She thought of Matteo and the extraordinary changes he had undergone in the past few days. He must be feeling as lost as I am. Maybe this marriage is an opportunity to truly help him. To make the difference I've always wanted to make, Lara mused, her heart tightening with empathy. A small smile formed on her lips. The hairstylist, noticing Lara's thoughtful expression, tried to lighten the mood. "Are you excited for the big day, miss?" she asked gently. Lara hesitated for a moment before replying. "It's complicated, but I'm determined to make the best of the situation." Her gaze met the stylist's in the mirror. Her mind wandered to the moments she had shared with Matteo over the past days, the hesitant conversations, the shy smiles, the evident gratitude in his eyes. He deserves a chance to rebuild his life. Maybe together, we can find a greater purpose in this situation, she reflected as the stylist put the finishing touches on her hair. Lara's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of nearby staff whispering. "That's Matilda's stepdaughter," one of them said. "Do you remember the scandal involving her stepmother?" The other woman nodded, leaning in closer. "How could I forget? They say she was involved in something terrible. They never proved anything, of course." Their conversation was cut short as they noticed Lara's gaze in the mirror. They quickly backed away, looking guilty. Lara's heart raced. Something terrible? What was Matilda involved in? She thought, her mind racing. She'd always wondered if Matilda was hiding something, especially with how she avoided discussing her life before marrying Thomas. There was a puzzle there, and Lara was determined to solve it. She stood up and walked over to the salon window, her reflection in the glass showing not just a bride, but a woman with purpose. I'm going to find out the truth. If Matilda is hiding something, I'll uncover it, Lara promised herself, her expression resolute. Hours later, the afternoon sun bathed the imposing facade of the church as a line of luxurious cars arrived. Matteo, dressed in the suit that still felt foreign on his body, nervously watched from the entrance. As high society guests stepped out of their vehicles, their curious and judgmental eyes immediately fixed on him. Whispers filled the air, words like beggar and scandal reaching his ears. Matteo's stomach churned as the reality of the situation hit him full force. How did I end up here? He thought, adjusting his tie for the 100th time. Why do these people look so disgusted when they see me? Does Lara think like they do? He murmured to himself, desperately searching the crowd for a friendly face. An elderly couple passed by, the woman unable to hide her look of disdain. Dear, did you hear? Matilda said he was living on the streets until last week. What a humiliation for poor Lara. The lady whispered loudly enough for Matteo to hear. The man beside her nodded, casting a dismissive glance at Matteo. They say it's some kind of punishment. But to expose the family like this, mingling with people like him? Lara must have lost her mind, he said. Matteo felt the blood drain from his face, the words landing like a punch to his stomach. Matilda had deliberately spread my story, he realized, turning me into a spectacle to humiliate Lara in front of everyone. So that's it. I'm just a tool to humiliate her. The anger and shame that rose within him left him dizzy, a mix of betrayal and self-loathing. How could I have been so naive? More guests arrived, their whispers and judgmental glances amplifying Matteo's discomfort. In the distance, he saw Matilda greeting guests with her usual fake smile, occasionally casting triumphant glances in his direction. Matteo clenched his fists, the urge to confront her bubbling inside him, but he kept his composure. Then, a gentle hand landed on his shoulder, startling him. He turned to find Thomas, Lara's father, his face filled with pity and guilt. Matteo, I'm sorry for all of this, Thomas murmured, his voice barely audible before he disappeared into the crowd. Even her father seems to be a victim in this twisted game, Matteo thought, his mind racing. An elderly gentleman, leaning on an ornate cane, approached Matteo. His eyes widened in shock as he studied Matteo's face closely. A flicker of recognition passed over the man's wrinkled features. It can't be, the old man murmured, his voice filled with disbelief. Matteo felt a spark of hope. Maybe this man won't judge me, he thought, but the elderly man glanced around nervously, as if afraid of being seen. He leaned in close, speaking in a hushed tone. You need to meet me in private, the man whispered urgently. It's important. Now. 5 minutes behind the church. Before Matteo could respond, the old man shuffled away as quickly as his cane allowed. Matteo stood there, heart racing. What's going on? Who is this man, and what does he need to tell me? His mind spun with questions, the puzzle pieces beginning to fit together, though the picture was more disturbing than he had imagined. Moments later, after meeting the elderly man, Matteo was left in shock as the weight of the revelations hit him. He returned to the church, the tension in the air palpable. Guests were settling into their seats, and Matteo, standing at the altar, felt his heart pound in his chest. The old man's words still echoed in his mind, the need to stay strong for Lara pushing him forward. As the Reverend cast a concerned glance at him, Matteo felt his anxiety grow. Is everything all right, young man? The Reverend whispered. Matteo nodded stiffly, clenching his jaw. I need to stay strong. Lara deserves the truth, but not like this. Not here. I won't abandon her at the altar, he thought, his determination building. Everything seemed to blur as the music began to play, and all eyes turned toward the entrance. Lara, radiant in her wedding dress, walked down the aisle with a mix of fear and determination in her gaze. With each step, it was as if she were marching toward an uncertain future. Matilda, seated in the front row, watched the scene with a smile that now seemed darker, more sinister to Mateo. If she only knew what I know now, he thought. When the truth comes out, everything will change. Lara reached the altar, her eyes meeting Mateo's for a brief, silent moment. A connection passed between them, a shared understanding. They were united in a way no one else could see, facing a greater force together. The Reverend began the ceremony, his voice echoing through the church, but to Mateo, the words seemed distant, overshadowed by the weight of the secret he now carried. Hold on, Mateo. Everything will be revealed at the right moment, he told himself. The ceremony continued, the tension growing with each word the Reverend spoke. Finally, the moment arrived. If anyone has any reason why this marriage should not take place, speak now or forever hold your peace, the Reverend announced, his voice reverberating in the stillness. A heavy silence fell over the church. Mateo felt his body tense, the truth burning in his throat, begging to be released. He fought the urge to speak, knowing that there was a greater plan at play. But to everyone's shock, Matilda suddenly stood up. I have something to say, she declared, her voice cutting through the silence like a knife. Mateo's heart nearly stopped. His eyes widened in shock. Panic surged through Mateo as he watched Matilda move down the aisle, her heels clicking sharply against the church floor. What is she doing? He thought, his heart racing. Could she know that I'd discovered the truth? Matilda's cruel smile never wavered as she reached the front, positioning herself beside the altar. She turned to face the congregation, her voice dripping with false sweetness. Dear guests, she began. I believe everyone deserves to know the truth about this wedding. Her gaze shifted to Lara, who stood frozen, pale with shock. This young woman, Matilda continued, pointing at the bride, thought she could defy our social standing by mingling with the scum of the streets. Well, here is the result of her foolish compassion. Tears burned in Lara's eyes, but she fought to keep them from falling. Please, Matilda, don't do this, she whispered, her voice trembling. It's too late for please, dear, Matilda responded, her tone sharp and cutting. You brought this on yourself. Matilda turned to the crowd, her arms outstretched in a dramatic gesture. Look, my friends. This is the bride who chose to marry a beggar, a man who, until last week, lived on the streets, dirty and hungry. Murmurs of shock and disapproval rippled through the church, and Mateo stood still, his fists clenched at his sides. How can she do this? The anger boiled inside him, but he knew he couldn't let her continue. Enough, he said, his voice low but firm. The words hung in the air, causing everyone to pause. The entire church seemed to hold its breath as Mateo stepped forward, placing himself between Matilda and Lara. His eyes blazed with an intensity that silenced the room. Enough of your lies, Matilda, Mateo said, his voice gaining strength with every word. Matilda stepped back, surprised by Mateo's sudden intervention. What do you think you're doing? She hissed, her composure starting to slip. I'm telling the truth, Mateo replied, his eyes never leaving hers. The truth you've hidden for so long. The silence in the church deepened as Mateo took a step forward, gathering his courage for what he was about to reveal. His voice, when he spoke, was clear and unwavering, echoing through the church walls. The time for the truth has come, he said, his words cutting through the tension. Matilda, you thought you could bury the past, but it always finds a way to surface. He paused, taking a breath, before continuing. My real name is Hudson Howard, Mateo said, the name feeling strange on his lips after all these years. That's the name I was born with. I am the son of Jonathan Howard, Matilda's first husband. The murmurs in the church grew louder, but Mateo pressed on. A few minutes ago, an elderly man approached me. He told me a story, one that resonated with me deeply, even though I couldn't remember it clearly. He spoke of a child, the son of a wealthy man, who mysteriously disappeared years ago. That child was me. Mateo's eyes locked onto Matilda's as he revealed the truth. He recognized my birthmark, the same one Jonathan Howard's son had before he vanished. When he learned my story, he connected the dots. Matilda's face paled, but Mateo didn't stop. Matilda, you were my father's second wife. When he died under mysterious circumstances, you inherited everything, but that wasn't enough. I was an obstacle, the legitimate heir who threatened your newly acquired status and wealth. So, you made a choice that changed everything. The room was quiet, the weight of Mateo's words sinking in. You abandoned me in a nearby town. Mateo continued, his voice steady. You erased me from your life, and everyone believed your lies about my disappearance. But I survived, even though I didn't understand why I always felt so out of place. Something pulled me back to this city, as if I unconsciously knew I belonged here. His eyes narrowed as he looked at Matilda. That brooch you wear, he said, his voice growing colder. I remembered it. I held it in my hand when I was just a child. It was the only thing I could recall because I clung to it after you left me on the streets. You didn't recognize me when you saw me, did you? The boy you abandoned was right in front of you, and you didn't even know. Mateo turned to Lara, whose face was still pale in shock. Lara, your kindness gave me the strength to face this truth, he said, his voice softening as he spoke to her. Your act of compassion on the street that day made me realize who I was, who I had been. Matilda, your obsession with social status, your cruelty disguised as lessons about life, all of it makes sense now. It was a facade, your way of hiding the truth. Hiding what you did to me and my father. He turned back to Matilda, his eyes blazing with fury. But no more. The truth has come to light. You can no longer hide behind your lies. It's time for you to face the consequences of your actions. You have to answer for the life you stole from me. The entire church stood in stunned silence, the weight of Mateo's words hanging in the air like a heavy fog. Matilda's face twisted with anger and fear as the truth she'd worked so hard to conceal was finally exposed for everyone to see. And the pain you caused so many others, including Lara and Thomas, Mateo's voice rang out, firm and resolute. I stand here today not as the broken man you thought you could manipulate in your schemes, but as Mateo Howard, reclaiming my identity and my rightful place in the world. I am here to ensure that justice is finally served. As Mateo finished speaking, the church erupted into chaos. Lara stood frozen, her face streaked with tears, as the full weight of Mateo's words crashed down on her. Matilda, pale and trembling, seemed to shrink beneath the force of the truth that had finally been revealed. Thomas, stunned by the revelation, stepped away from his wife, as though seeing her for the first time, and not liking what he saw. The shock of it all hung in the air, thick and oppressive. In the days that followed, everything changed for everyone involved. Mateo, determined to prove his identity once and for all, underwent a DNA test with a distant relative of the Howard family. Tension filled the air as everyone awaited the results. Finally, on a sunny afternoon, Mateo, Lara, and Thomas gathered in the family lawyer's office. The lawyer opened the envelope containing the test results with trembling hands. It's positive, the lawyer announced, his voice breaking the stunned silence of the room. Mateo is without a doubt the long-lost son of Jonathan Howard. Lara squeezed Mateo's hand, tears of relief and happiness glistening in her eyes. Thomas, still processing everything, placed a comforting hand on Mateo's shoulder. Finally, Thomas said, his voice thick with emotion. After so many years, the truth has come to light. It feels good to take off the blindfold and see that, despite everything, we can still be happy. Mateo's voice caught as he spoke, the emotion swelling inside him. Yes, he murmured. It feels good to finally be seen for who I truly am. Meanwhile, the consequences for Matilda were swift and severe. Accused of fraud, manipulation, and possibly even involvement in Jonathan Howard's death, she found herself in the midst of a lengthy and complicated legal battle. The police arrived at the mansion with a search and seizure warrant, and Matilda, still in shock, watched helplessly as officers combed through every room, seizing documents, computers, and even her precious brooch, which had now become a key piece of evidence. The prosecutor, eager to make an example of someone so influential, pushed for a full investigation into Jonathan's death, which had been ruled an accident years ago. Matilda, once revered in high society, now found herself shunned. Invitations to charity events and exclusive dinners vanished overnight, and former friends turned away when they saw her in public, fearful of being associated with someone whose reputation had become so toxic. Her assets were frozen as investigations continued, and the mansion that had once felt like her personal kingdom now seemed like a gilded cage. Reporters camped outside, eager for a glimpse of the disgraced socialite. The once untouchable woman who had carefully crafted her life of luxury and power was now alone, isolated, and facing the very real possibility of spending years behind bars. In an ironic twist, Matilda began to experience a fraction of the helplessness she had once inflicted on Mateo all those years ago. As the evidence of her manipulations piled up, it became clear that her fall from grace would be swift and unforgiving. Meanwhile, Mateo and Lara grew closer, their bond strengthened by the adversity they had faced together. In an intimate ceremony, far removed from the grand spectacle Matilda had once planned, they married. There were no ulterior motives this time, just true love, a shared desire to build a life together, and a determination to make a positive impact on the world. Lara, now holding the hands of her husband, turned to him with a thoughtful expression. "What do you think about using our combined fortunes to help people who are in the same situation you once were?" Mateo's eyes lit up with emotion and determination. "Nothing would make me happier, my love. Let's turn this tragedy into something positive." In the months that followed, Mateo and Lara established a foundation dedicated to helping the homeless and abandoned children, those whom society often forgets. Together, they worked tirelessly to provide shelter, education, and opportunities to those who needed it most. Thomas, deeply regretful for his unintentional role in Matilda's schemes, actively joined the couple's charitable efforts, helping in any way he could. Mateo's story, from beggar to long-lost heir, and his subsequent philanthropic work captured the public's imagination. He became a symbol of hope and redemption, a living testament to the idea that it is possible to overcome even the most adverse circumstances. One quiet evening, as Mateo and Lara sat on their porch, watching the sunset, they reflected on all they had been through. Though the past had been fraught with pain and deception, they had emerged from it stronger than ever, their love and their resolve guiding them toward a future of hope, justice, and transformation. Mateo turned to Lara, his eyes soft with emotion. "For so many years I felt lost, like I was searching for something I couldn't even name. Now I realize I was searching for this, a home, a purpose, someone to love." Lara smiled, snuggling closer to him. "And to think, it all started with a simple act of kindness on the street. Never underestimate the power of helping someone, Mateo. It can change the world." What began as a cruel plot of revenge and humiliation had transformed into a story of love, redemption, and hope. United by the unimaginable challenges they'd faced together, Mateo and Lara dedicated their lives to turning their painful past into a brighter future for others. The Howard Harrison Foundation, established by the couple, quickly became a powerful force for change in the city. Shelters for the homeless were opened, offering not just a roof but also rehabilitation programs and job training. Abandoned children found loving homes through carefully supervised adoption programs. Each year, dozens of young people received scholarships, giving them the chance to escape the cycle of poverty that Mateo knew all too well. The impact of their work spread like ripples on water. Inspired by Mateo and Lara's example, other wealthy families began to reassess their own priorities. The city, once known for its indifferent elite, gained a new reputation for compassion and social progress. Mateo, the lost boy who had become a symbol of resilience, frequently spoke at schools and universities, sharing his story and encouraging others to never lose hope. Lara, in turn, used her social connections to garner support for causes that had long been ignored by high society. Together, they proved that a person's true worth is not measured by their social status or bank account, but by their ability to reach out and lift others up. Their story became a powerful reminder that even in the darkest of circumstances, kindness can prevail, and that a single act of compassion has the power to spark profound change. As the years passed, Matteo and Lara looked back with a mixture of wonder and gratitude for the journey that had brought them to where they were. What had started as a simple gesture of kindness on a busy street had blossomed into a movement that changed lives. They continued their work with tireless dedication, determined to make the world a better place, one act of kindness at a time. They proved that true love and compassion have the power to overcome even the deepest darkness. Their work, and the lives they touched, became a testament to the enduring power of kindness. If you enjoyed this story, we invite you to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support motivates us to continue bringing you heartwarming stories almost every day. Don't miss the next surprising narrative coming up on your screen. We're incredibly grateful to have you here with us. Now, click on the links appearing on your screen. We've selected a special collection just for you, full of valuable stories and guaranteed entertainment. See you there.